My name is Brianna Whitfield. I am 33 years old. And on the morning I was supposed to marry Owen Prescott, I stood in the glass house at North Shore Cabins, the resort my father and I rebuilt. 140 guests filled the room, surrounded by a place I had spent years protecting. 10 minutes earlier, Owen had tried to make me sign something I would never sign. He pulled me into an office and placed a document on the desk. He called it an authorization, but it gave Prescott Lake Weddings the right to market my property, collect deposits, and use several cabins for years. When I refused, Owen said marriage meant trusting him enough to stop separating what was mine from what was ours. I told him trust did not require me to surrender property he did not own. Owen walked into the ceremony smiling as if nothing had happened. When the officiant handed him my wedding ring, he did not move toward me. Instead, he called Cassidy Monroe, his childhood friend, from the front row and asked her to stand beside him. She walked forward in a champagne dress and never asked what he was doing. Owen said he was tired of asking permission and being treated like a stranger in our future. He said Cassidy had always believed in him and understood partnership better than I did. Then he took the ring meant for my hand and slid it onto Cassidy's finger while everyone watched. Cassidy looked at me, but she did not take it off. Owen turned back to me and asked, "Well?" I looked at him, then at Cassidy, then at the ring on her hand, and said, "Go on." His confidence disappeared because he had expected tears or surrender. Instead, I turned to the officiant and said the ceremony was over. I did not leave North Shore because this was my home, my business, and my property. Owen believed I had made an emotional decision. He did not know I had seen the name Prescott Lake Weddings 2 weeks earlier. He had no idea I knew what he and Cassidy had planned. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was in the resort office reviewing schedules when Travis came in holding a visitor log. He asked why Cassidy had brought couples through the North Cabins that morning when the area was closed for roof repairs. I had no idea what he meant. Travis set the log on my desk and pointed to Cassidy's name. One couple had left a brochure behind. The cover showed a photo of North Shore Cabins with the words, "Prescott Lake Weddings, launching next spring." Cassidy was listed as creative director, and Owen as development partner. My name was nowhere on it, and neither was North Shore as a partner. At first, I told myself it might be a proposal Owen planned to show me after the wedding. Then the front desk transferred a call from a woman asking about the $5,000 deposit she had paid to reserve a date for the following summer. North Shore had never received that money. I asked my staff to stay calm and send every question about Prescott Lake Weddings to me. I called Cassidy and asked if she was selling wedding packages using my property. She said Owen had explained that the paperwork would be finished after we married, so they were only building the booking pipeline early. I asked what would change about the ownership of North Shore after my wedding. Cassidy went quiet, then told me I should ask Owen. That night, Owen came home and did not deny any of it. He said I was being too literal and that using a few cabins for a business we would share was obvious once we became husband and wife. I asked why our business carried his last name and why Cassidy was collecting deposits. Owen said Cassidy understood the wedding market, while I always saw risk before opportunity. That was when something shifted for me. Owen did not think he was taking anything because he had decided marriage would give him the right to use it. I did not cancel the wedding that night. I needed to know how much he had already promised before I decided what came next. I took the brochure, deposit information, and authorization draft Owen had shown me to Melissa Carver, the property advisor who had worked with North Shore for years. I expected her to tell me the wedding business was sloppy. Instead, she found something bigger. Prescott Lake Weddings LLC had been formed 4 months earlier by Owen and Cassidy, and my name appeared nowhere in the records. The LLC was seeking financing to renovate cabins, build a lakeside pavilion, and expand the dock. The loan had not been funded, but the lender was far enough into underwriting that Owen had submitted a financial summary. North Shore was listed as the future operating site. Then I saw one sentence that stopped me. Ownership alignment will be finalized immediately following our marriage. Melissa explained that Owen could not pledge North Shore because he did not own it. He had persuaded the lender to keep reviewing the deal by promising that after our wedding, he would have access to the property. Suddenly, every document he had pushed toward me for months looked different. He had not been preparing for our marriage. He had been preparing for my signature. I still did not have proof that Owen and Cassidy were having an affair. Then Travis gave me access logs from a guest cottage. Showing Cassidy had stayed there on nights Owen claimed he was meeting contractors late. Owen's staff keycard had been used after midnight, and a restaurant charge for 2 matched one of those nights. I asked Owen directly whether something was happening between them. He never said yes or no, only that Cassidy was the one person who believed in his ideas without demanding proof at every step. That answer told me enough. I told Melissa that if Owen wanted Cassidy instead of me, that was his decision. What he could not take with him was North Shore or the customers who had paid money based on promises I never approved. Melissa told me to lock outside, booking access, require written approval for every cabin visit, and prepare formal notice if Cassidy kept marketing the resort. That was when I realized the authorization Owen planned to put in front of me before the wedding was final piece, their lender still needed. The room filled with whispers, but I did not stay to explain myself. My mother wanted to confront Owen, and I asked her to let me handle it. I walked to the resort office in my wedding dress, and Owen followed with Cassidy behind him. She was still wearing my ring. Owen closed the door and asked if I was really going to jeopardize the lender, the deposits, and months of planning over what had happened. He did not begin with an apology. He began with a project. That told me everything about his priorities. He insisted the ring was only meant to show how tired he was of asking permission. He said he never believed I would cancel the wedding in front of everyone. I told him that was exactly why he had chosen that moment. He thought 140 witnesses would make me afraid to say no. Then I asked Cassidy how much money she had collected from couples. She said around $20,000 and claimed most was still in the business account. Travis came in with the booking information from calls to the resort. 9 couples had paid nearly $45,000. Cassidy admitted some money had gone toward branding, photography, a website, planning materials, and vendor retainers. I told her North Shore had never accepted those bookings, so the resort would not honor promises it had never made. They would have to refund the couples or find another venue. Owen snapped that those people had relied on his word, and I reminded him he had promised them property that did not belong to him. Martin and Elaine Prescott arrived while we were still arguing. Elaine said Owen had behaved terribly, but warned me not to ruin everyone's future over one emotional mistake. Martin asked what it would take to keep the project moving. I placed the Prescott Lake Weddings filing and lender summary on the desk. I told them the company had been formed 4 months earlier, so none of this had started at the ceremony. Martin read the documents twice before looking at his son. Then he asked Owen if he had told the lender North Shore would fall under his control after we married. Owen did not answer. Not even one word. By the next morning, the canceled ceremony had reached people beyond our guest list. A short video of Owen putting my ring on Cassidy's hand was being passed around locally, and several couples who had booked Prescott Lake weddings recognized North Shore. They started calling the resort, worried their promised venue was no longer available. I told my staff to send every call to me. I told each couple that North Shore had never signed an agreement with Prescott Lake Weddings. We had not received their deposits, and we could not confirm dates that Cassidy had sold without our approval. I gave each couple a written statement to request a refund. I was not going to make them pay for decisions they had nothing to do with. Several couples sent me copies of the contracts Cassidy had given them. Those contracts promised cabin blocks, access to our dock, catering facilities, and a lakeside pavilion that did not exist yet. Melissa reviewed everything and sent formal notice ordering Prescott Lake Weddings to stop using our name. address, photographs, and amenities in its marketing. Owen could no longer dismiss this as our disagreement. The lender learned that our wedding had been canceled and asked Owen to prove the ownership alignment described in his financial documents. He could not, because there was nothing to prove. Without North Shore as the operating site, the lender paused the financing review. Owen asked Martin to substitute a Prescott family property, but Martin refused after realizing the numbers depended on our existing cabins, permits, kitchen, dock, and location. At the meeting about the deposits, Cassidy finally started to panic. Some money had already gone to vendors, and without financing, she had no easy way to replace it. She turned on Owen in front of Martin, Elaine, and me and asked why he had promised I would sign once the wedding was close enough that I could not back out. The room went completely still. Elaine stared at her son, and Martin asked if that was why Owen had waited until minutes before the ceremony to hand me the authorization. Owen said Cassidy was twisting his words, but she fired back that he had repeatedly told her I would stop separating my property from his after we married. I said nothing in front of me. Under pressure, they were finally telling the truth to each other. Cassidy asked to speak with me alone the next afternoon. She looked exhausted, and for the first time since the ceremony, my ring was no longer on her hand. She said Owen had told her our relationship was practically over months ago, and that I stayed only because North Shore tied our lives together. I did not argue about what he had told her. I asked one question instead. Had Owen ever shown her a deed, signed authorization, or operating agreement giving him control over North Shore? Cassidy looked down and said no. She said Owen promised the paperwork would be handled after the wedding, and that she believed him because he spoke as if the outcome had already been decided. Then I asked why she had accepted deposits before any of that paperwork existed. Cassidy said Owen kept telling her everything was certain and that delaying bookings would cost them the next wedding season. I reminded her that she was not just Owen's friend anymore. She was also an owner of the LLC taking money from real customers. Cassidy finally admitted Owen had promised she would manage the wedding operation while he handled development. She had believed they were building something together and that North Shore would become the foundation of it once we married. That was when she seemed to understand the part Owen had never explained clearly. Their entire plan depended on me giving them access to property neither of them owned. The financial pressure started almost immediately. Cassidy used part of her savings to cover refunds, while Owen had to contribute the rest because they owned the LLC together. Several vendor retainers were non-refundable, and they began arguing over who had approved each expense. The partnership that had looked so certain when my ring was on Cassidy's hand started falling apart as soon as the bills became real. That evening, Owen found me near the dock at North Shore. He apologized for the affair and for what he had done during the ceremony, then asked me to let Prescott Lake Weddings use the cabins for one season so they could recover enough money to close properly. He said afterward we could try counseling. I asked if Cassidy knew he was offering to shut down the future he had promised her. Owen said nothing. That silence felt more honest than anything else he had told me. He pulled my ring from his pocket and said Cassidy had returned it after their argument, because it had always belonged to me. I told him the ring had belonged to a promise, and he had turned that promise into leverage. He had asked me to choose between my signature and him, and I had already made my choice. Prescott Lake Weddings never recovered after North Shore was removed from the plan. The lender closed the financing file because the operating site described in the proposal was no longer available. Melissa handled the remaining issues through a settlement, so there was no dramatic trial. Owen and Cassidy had to stop using North Shore's name, photographs, address, and amenities, and the LLC had to cover the refunds and vendor costs it had created. Martin agreed to lend Owen enough money to settle the obligations that were still open, but he refused to treat it as a rescue. The money was documented as a debt, and Owen would have to repay it. Martin also removed him from independent approval on one of the family's development projects. From that point forward, Another executive had to review and sign off on Owen's proposals. Cassidy covered her share with savings and a personal loan. Several referral partners stopped sending clients after the booking mess, and her local business slowed. Elaine came to see me once and admitted she had been wrong to call my decision revenge. She said she had spent years asking me to understand Owen and Cassidy without asking them to respect my boundaries in return. I accepted the apology, but I told her our relationship would not return to what it had been. There was nothing left to negotiate between our families. Owen and I completed the final separation of our finances, and afterward he asked to meet me one last time. He looked tired when he asked whether I would have married him if he had never put my ring on Cassidy's hand. I let the question sit between us. Then I told him the truth. Maybe I would have. For a second, relief crossed his face, until I explained why that answer frightened me more than anything else. If he had kept pressuring me behind closed doors, I might have kept doubting myself. I might have signed one more document just to prove I trusted him. The ring did not destroy our future. It only forced me to see what that future would have required from me. 8 months later, Prescott Lake Weddings was closed. Every couple received the money they were owed, and Cassidy signed away any right to use North Shore's name, photographs, address, or property and business. She covered her obligations with savings and a personal loan, then took an event coordinator job with a hotel chain in another state. She and Owen ended their relationship before the LLC finished closing, and I never asked who left first. Owen stayed in his father's company, but Martin no longer allowed him to approve major projects alone. He had to repay the money Martin loaned him for the LLC, and every new proposal went through independent review. Martin met me once to finish the documents and admitted he had treated marriage like automatic access to my property. I accepted that admission, but North Shore never entered an arrangement with the Prescott family. Elaine brought my ring back herself. She apologized for asking me to make room for Owen and Cassidy, while rarely asking them to respect my boundaries. I accepted the apology, but told her we were no longer family. After she left, I sold the ring and used part of the money to put a bench near the lake where my mother liked to read. Travis became North Shore's general operations manager, with authority written into his contract. Melissa stayed as an advisor, and together we created a rule that no one could market, book, or promise resort property without written authorization. My mother returned on the anniversary of my father's death and told me she understood that compromise stops being love when it requires surrendering your right to choose. I told her I understood that too. I kept North Shore the size I wanted and renovated only the cabins that made sense. Owen once thought, "Go on," meant I was daring him to put my ring on Cassidy's hand. What I meant was simpler. If that was the man he chose to be, I would stop trying to change him. Leaving was not punishment. It was refusing to keep negotiating for basic respect. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts, like, and subscribe.